Greetings, Acolyte, and welcome back to the Ordo Grigio, the Emperor's secret society against the enemy that is unpainted models. Today I'm using only the Army Painter starter set to paint my first, and maybe my last, Ork Mob in a single day. So at 9 PM at night, because why would I start at a reasonable time, we begin from a zenithal grey-black prime applied through my airbrush, and seeing as they're orcs, let's get on with the greenskin for the green skin. Let's thin this paint down with a touch of water and go over each of the model's skin with a nice smooth layer of paint. Now I'm batch painting these in one night, so I'm being a bit fast and loose with where the paint goes, as it's the first colour on the model, and by the time I get to the next paint it'll be totally dry, so I won't need to worry about any of the paint mixing. Now when I'm batch painting, I normally do one colour on each of the models, though this can get quite repetitive. I still think it is the most effective way to paint groups of models at once, especially when you're trying to go fast or have a large army like Orcs or Imperial Guard infantry. Normally I do say to try and be as neat as possible, however on the first step of batch painting, it's the lowest colour and nothing else is painted, so as long as you're not planning to leave anything based on the primer later on, just get the colour down, get it out of the way and get it done. Now once the layer of greenskin's all done, you can see the unit looks a little bit like this. At this point I wasn't planning on them looking like the bad moons that they do now, as I was thinking more of a tech scavenging feral orc tribe. However, I tried the ultramarine paint with the idea of doing alternate shirt and trousers with the colour, but as you can see I couldn't really get the coverage right on the models. As always on the channel, I've left myself not very much time to achieve what I want to achieve, and with the time frame I have, the amount of models to paint, I can't really go back and do 2 or 3 layers to get a smooth coat. I'm nothing if not ambitious at least. So, as I still didn't have a solid plan for the orcs, I tried out Daemonic Yellow, hoping it would be better. The first few goes of the colour was better than the ultramarine, however still took some getting used to. I stuck with it though, as I quite liked how the yellow sat with the green skin and thought it would be a good final result. While painting the yellow on the shirts, I started to feel like I wasn't really enjoying painting these models at all. I've wanted an Ork Army for years, since I first saw the Feral Ork article in Chapter Approved, but now going through with painting them, there's just nothing there. These models are a mix of 2 different generations of Ork kit, and none of them were built by me, although they were free, so I can't really complain. All I can think about is how the mould lines will show through, or the poses aren't what I wanted. Some models don't really fit the aesthetic I wanted from my orcs, but free orcs is free orcs. But with the low points cost and intricacy of the model, I'm really struggling to imagine spending so much time and energy into so many models, especially as they're just going to be an NPC faction in my campaign. But then I came to the realisation that painting orcs is a lot like painting chaos. It doesn't need to be perfect, even less so than other factions, and in fact, a little imperfection or roughness would just add to the ramshackle nature of the orcs. So Daemonic Yellow it is. I guess bad moons aren't so bad. Once the shirts were yellowed up, we can see what the models look like here, and I'm starting to like them a bit more, so let's keep going. Next up, let's get the metallics done using plate mail steel. Whether these orcs end up as feral orcs in the campaign or just a solitary unit of bad moons, most of their gear would still be ramshackle, looted, or just made of scrap, and plate mail steel is a lot brighter than my regular silver lead belcher from Citadel. Though that is one of the constraints I have to work with, setting myself the limitation of using a single paint set for an entire unit. Though I do think it's good to show what can be achieved with a basic set of paints, rather than using 17 different technical paints and accessories that most people pick up over years of painting. As the silver's a bit brighter than I would ideally use, I decided not to go too heavy on with the paint, and instead of looking for full coverage, I more just highlighted or implied the metallic surface to try and dull it down, but it still comes off a bit bright for an orc, though I do have a step later on that will help address that. In an ideal world where I had unlimited time and patience, I would love to paint all the metallics with a rust effect, however I mostly live in the real world and simply couldn't spend that much time on each individual orc, Though if I ever include a big mech into the orcs, that could make a cool centerpiece for an army. Once all the metallics are done, you can see the models are starting to come together as a mob, though it is approaching 2 AM at this time and I'm still unsure if I even like the unit. But a wise man once said, when painting, you have to trust the process, even if I'm flying by the seat of my pants. Let's move on to the Barbarian Flesh for all the non-leather cloth, which on these boys means pants. I mostly chose this colour because of the limited palette I'm working with, but I wanted to give them a hide-like appearance like uncured leather or some sort of feral basic fabric. The initial goal was feral orcs spreading from the marshes of the planet in the campaign world. However, now I'm painting not even half of the starting force for the orcs. I'm not 100% sure on that idea anymore. As I progress through this stage, I am noticing that despite the greens and yellows on the models, it is coming across a bit earthy, especially since I know how much brown there is left to go. It does make sense for angry mushroom people though, so maybe it's not all bad. And looking back as I make this video, I'm pretty sure I was mostly overthinking the decisions I was making, and in the heat of the moment, this can be quite hard to overcome, especially painting into the early hours of the morning with a tight deadline. Though if I am being totally honest, sometimes I find it hard to motivate myself to paint unless there's an end goal other than the painting itself. And that's where this channel's kinda come from, and why I'll be putting out at least one video a week to get myself at the painting table and clear the sea of grey models scattered around my house. Knowing how much brown was to come, I decided to counter the overpowering earth tones with the pure red in the set, just to bring out a few details on the unit, such as the top knot you can see here, and the power cable on the knob's huge chopper. Never thought I'd say that as a sentence. Now I'm not sure if I'm not shaking these paints right, but the paints in this set seem to be quite inconsistent, and each colour reacts differently to and requires different thinning. The red I'm using held its opacity better than any of the other colours I'd used other than the green, apart from when a drop of water rolled off my brush onto the model and spread the pigment. However, I just wicked it away with a clean brush, and while I had the red out anyway, I painted any of the exposed tongues on the orcs. Glad I chose to do this before painting the teeth. As you can see, the little pops of red really help give the unit what the French call a certain...
I don't know what.
Now we're past the halfway point, in colours at least, and it's time for leather brown. To paint the leather brown. Crazy. This includes all the belts, straps, furs, gloves, wrappings on the top knots, armbands, and I'm using for a base of the bone colours and the teeth as well. I'm glad I added an extra colour in the mix, otherwise they would have looked a bit more like mud people, and if they were placed on a muddy, marshy battlefield, I'd probably lose a unit at some point and forget to make a move. At this point, I've used all but 3 of the colours in the paint set, and although it wasn't my intention to use them all, it is showing the effectiveness of the set, as I haven't really reached for my other paints yet, and the models don't look or feel like they were painted with a restricted palette. The limitations of the colours is offset mostly by including both a black and a white, as these can be used to shift the colours up or down. You'll see that later. Though I would have liked to see maybe a tan or an off-white included, as when mixing with black or white it tends to desaturate the colour and it can look a bit off if you're not wanting to work all the way up to white for your highlights. However, the kit is aimed at beginners getting into the hobby or people just starting painting, so I won't really hold this against them. I think with the accidental Bad Moon scheme, the lore of the planet may get an update to have been invaded by the Bad Moons in the past, so if I do decide to go with the Feral Orcs in the campaign as a faction, this unit could be Mad Boys who the Pig Docs gathered up. He's convinced them that they're the true Bad Moon Orcs, and they're thrown into battle to unleash their particular brand of crazy. Now at this stage I was being a lot more careful with where I placed the paint, as the rest of the model was already painted how I wanted them to be, and any overspill would cost me time. As much as we try to avoid mistakes, they are going to happen, especially when painting a large group of miniatures together in a single sitting. But the less mistakes you make, the less mistakes you have to clean up.
2 hours later.
After covering approximately 50% of every model brown, the unit is ready for the campaign, and Bruce, if you're watching, this is what I mean by tabletop standard. However, I wouldn't be me if I left them there. why would I accept models that are totally acceptable? I wasn't feeling how the leather and bone were the same colour, and I found myself staring over at my collection of other paints, beckoning me to use them. But I had decided to use only the Start Painter set, so I decided to mix together leather brown and matte white into a very specific scientific ratio of it'll do. I then gave the bone on the knob's boss pole a quick overbrush, as well as the orc skull carried by one of the boys. I could have gone in and done all the teeth this colour, but I decided I liked what was left of my sanity, and I didn't. Paint the teeth, I mean. I did also go back in with a second layer with more white mixed into it, with less coverage to add a further contrast and highlight, and while this dried I went around and touched up any of the other models with areas of overspill or where I'd got painting wrong, and that prepared the models for the next stage. The next and final step in this video is to apply a coat of strong tone across the whole model. Now in true Orky fashion, I'm going in hard and heavy. This final step is how I can get away with being a bit careless about getting into the deepest of the recesses, as shades naturally settle into the recesses and shade them. This adds an extra layer of contrast and also tints the surface of the model, darken it down and giving it a dirtier, more grim and some may say dark look. As I cover each model, they go into my movement tray where the orcs will be stored while I decide if I will continue to build the orc force or not. Whilst applying the wash, all my earlier hesitations or hang-ups about painting orcs is sort of fading away with each model that makes it into the movement tray. The wash is tying together all the different colours and forming the orcs into a proper mob, and I'm almost feeling good about them. Now they're by no means perfect, but my initial plan for them as an NPC faction in a map-based 40k campaign means they're essentially cannon fodder anyway. And I'd much rather have them at this standard than unpainted plastic sitting in a box under my gaming table. So overall a success, I guess. Though not a particularly smooth ride to get there. You may have noticed that I've left off painting the bases, as I'm still unsure about whether they'll become part of a feral orc army. If they are to become part of an army, then I do have a plan for the bases, similar to what I did on the Space Wolf Berserker, and it may not surprise you that my idea for a feral orc army wouldn't exactly be normal. But that's an idea for another time. As always, thank you for watching, and I hope you've enjoyed my journey into orc culture for a day. If you want to see a feral orc tribe grow or have any other suggestions for videos or tutorials, let me know down in the comments below, and I'll see you all next time.